Have you ever found yourself in a conversation where it felt like there was something more going on than what was being said? Perhaps as though the other person was kind of just dancing around the real issue without ever actually verbalizing it. Maybe you can even identify times where you have done this yourself. I know I sure can. Hello, my friends. Jeffrey Shao here from Grow to Your Potential. As we continue our journey of exploring the role of communication and navigating from unhealthy conflict to that healthy conflict we so desperately need, today we venture into that which is not said. As Peter Drucker puts it, the most important thing in communication is to hear what isn't said. That's an interesting statement, isn't it? How do you hear what isn't said? Well, this is similar to what we talked about last week when I stressed the importance of challenging our assumptions. If you haven't watched that video yet, please be sure to check it out. And don't worry, I'll still be here when you get back. Okay, hearing that which isn't spoken. What does this mean? What does it look like? When we communicate with others, we can place a lot of importance on the words that we speak, and yet tone of voice and body language also come into play and can actually account for 90% of how one interprets you in a face-to-face discussion. That's pretty significant. However, getting to the unspoken goes beyond this. As I mentioned at the beginning of our time together today, we can often engage in a conversation where we dance around the real issue. We can find ourselves doing this, avoiding the core issue to a problem for many reasons. Sometimes we don't even know we are doing it because we haven't been able to identify what the core issue is, or that there even is one beyond what we're already addressing. Other times we do this because it's easier to deal with a surface issue than it is to just dive into the uncomfortableness and unknowns of the core issue. At times, we can get so hung up on a symptom that we neglect the heart of the problem we really want addressed. This is something my wife and I have worked to improve in our communications, and I will share an example that may help you relate better to what I'm talking about. My wife and I often ran into issues where she'd share key information with her family. This could be highlights from her day, all the way to making plans for our families. These are reasonable things to do by any measure, right? Well, the problem was she often didn't share the same information with me, which resulted in times where I would be surprised by events or news I felt I should have been in the loop on. And thus, a potentially tense discussion would follow. This is where hearing the unsaid comes in. We focused on the surface issues rather than delving into what was not being said. As a result, the cycle repeated itself. It was only when we went deeper that we found out the root causes behind the problems we were facing. And once we did that, I focused on being more available and receptive so my wife would find it easier to approach me with the comfort and security she could her family. And my wife was able to understand how my not being included not only affected my need for details, but also connected to a much deeper desire to be a good husband and father, which was feeling threatened when I was not in the loop. My friends, we are complex people. We have layers, much like onions or parfaits, for those of you who enjoyed the movie Shrek. And when we get into those tense conversations with others, we need to listen for what is not being said in both ourselves and others. Don't be afraid to dive deeper and go beyond the surface issue. Often there is more to it than what we originally think. This can be tricky at first, but it does become easier and the rewards are worth it. A great starting point is to get to know yourself better as well as those around you. And one such method is through a DISC behavioral analysis assessment and debrief session. And we'll be talking more about our role of our behavioral style in the coming weeks. But until then, if this is something you would like to explore further, check out my website or contact me and I will gladly guide you further. That's it for today. I thank you for joining me and I look forward to next week as I explore the need to get off of email and go face to face with our communication. Until then, continue to practice challenging your assumptions and listening for what is not being said so you move away from that unhealthy conflict into that healthy conflict zone so you can continue to grow to your potential.